You are now not in the presence of nice guys. One shot, one kill, one shot, one kill, one shot, one kill.
Yes, I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
I'm just here to protest! Please, stand down! Peaceful protest.
I just don't even know why there aren't uprisings all over the country.
And if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere.
Do something about your dad's immigration practices, you feckless.
What's Uncle Tom but for white women who disappoint other white women?
One way you get rid of Trump is a crashing economy, so please bring on the recession.
When was the last time an actor assassinated a president?
We do have it, Nora. We've told that the congressman who was shot in the hip has been identified as Steve Scalise.
He is the Republican House Majority Whip. And
a small restaurant in the U.S. state of Virginia has found itself at the center of a political storm after the owner asked President Donald Trump's spokeswoman to leave. Sarah Sanders wrote about the incident on Twitter, saying she was asked to leave the restaurant in Lexington because she worked for President Trump. The restaurant, 3 hours from Washington, has received widespread support for its actions.
She said, hey guys, pay attention. There's a couple guys over here talking about Eugene. They're talking about his hat. And she was like, she just wanted to let us know what was going on. And, you know, as time went by, you know, I looked back at the guy, seen the guy was staring at me. I didn't think anything of it. You know, I just ignored it. And, you know, as time was going by, waitresses and different waiters were coming to our table. You know, they were just being really rude to us. A group of the coworkers, you know, started standing behind me, and they just started saying some crazy things. And we all were at the table, like, we were shocked to hear some things like that.
What's wrong with my hat? It's my video. What's wrong with me supporting Trump?
He was following us through around Starbucks and he got me a Trump hat.
What's wrong with my hat? What do you want to do about this? What do you want to do about it? I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do.
I want to name some prominent people who have been involved with America's racial history, and I'd like you to tell me simply if they were Republicans or if they were Democrats.
Okay.
Let's begin with the inventor of the positive good school of slavery, the idea that slavery was a good idea, Senator John C. Calhoun.
Democrat.
What about the writer of the Dred Scott decision authorizing slavery and claiming that blacks have no rights, that a white man ought to respect, Roger Taney?
That sounds like a Democrat.
What about the founder of the Ku Klux Klan, Nathan Bedford Forrest, who was also a Confederate general?
Democrat.
Let's now talk about a few more figures in American history who resisted racial oppression. Abraham Lincoln.
Republican.
His Secretary of State, Seward.
Republican.
What about the two leading senators who championed the cause of abolitionism, Thaddeus Stevens and Sumner?
Well, they were Republicans.
What about Frederick Douglass, the runaway slave who became a champion of the abolitionist movement?
Republican.
Since its founding in 1829, the Democratic Party has fought against every major civil rights initiative and has a long history of discrimination. The Democratic Party defended slavery, started the Civil War, opposed Reconstruction, founded the Ku Klux Klan, imposed segregation, perpetrated lynchings, and fought against the Civil Rights Acts of the 1950s and 1960s. In contrast, the Republican Party was founded in 1854 as an anti-slavery party. Its mission was to stop the spread of slavery into the new Western territories with the aim of abolishing it entirely. This effort, however, was dealt a major blow by the Supreme Court in the 1857 case Dred Scott versus Sandford. The court ruled that slaves aren't citizens, they're property. The 7 justices who voted in favor of slavery all Democrats. The 2 justices who dissented, both Republicans. The slavery question was, of course, ultimately resolved by a bloody civil war. The commander-in-chief during that war was the first Republican president, Abraham Lincoln, the man who freed the slaves. 6 days after the Confederate Army surrendered, John Wilkes Booth, a Democrat, assassinated President Lincoln. Lincoln's vice president, a Democrat named Andrew Johnson, assumed the presidency. But Johnson adamantly opposed Lincoln's plan to integrate the newly freed slaves into the South's economic and social order. Johnson and the Democratic Party were unified in their opposition to the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery, the 14th Amendment, which gave blacks citizenship, and the 15th Amendment, which gave blacks the vote. All 3 passed only because of universal Republican support. During the era of Reconstruction, federal troops stationed in the South helped secure rights for the newly freed slaves. Hundreds of black men were elected to Southern state legislatures as Republicans, and 22 black Republicans served in the U.S. Congress by 1900. The Democrats did not elect a black man to Congress until 1935. But after Reconstruction ended, when the federal troops went home, Democrats roared back into power in the South. They quickly reestablished white supremacy across the region with measures like black codes, laws that restricted the ability of blacks to own property and run businesses, and they imposed poll taxes and literacy tests used to subvert black citizens' right to vote. And how was all of this enforced? By terror, much of it instigated by the Ku Klux Klan, founded by a Democrat, Nathan Bedford Forrest. As historian Eric Foner, himself a Democrat, notes, in effect, the Klan was a military force serving the interests of the Democratic Party. President Woodrow Wilson, a Democrat, shared many views with the Klan. He resegregated many federal agencies and even screened the first movie ever played at the White House, the racist film, The Birth of a Nation, originally entitled The Klansman. A few decades later, the only serious congressional opposition to the landmark Civil Rights Act of 1964 came from Democrats. 80% of Republicans in Congress supported the bill, less than 70% of Democrats did. Democratic senators filibustered the bill for 75 days until Republicans mustered the few extra votes needed to break the logjam. And when all of their efforts to enslave blacks, keep them enslaved, and then keep them from voting had failed, the Democrats came up with a new strategy. If black people are going to vote, they might as well vote for Democrats, as President Lyndon Johnson was purported to have said about the Civil Rights Act. I'll have them voting Democrat for 200 years.
I'm Dr. Alveda King, niece of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. I greet you today, and I just want to share with you a little bit about my family and my history. My uncle, Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., during his lifetime, was a Republican, as was my father, his brother, Reverend A.D. King, and my grandfather, Dr. Martin Luther King, Sr. The Republican Party historically has supported the rights of the oppressed. During the times of slavery, many of the abolitionists were Republicans. Today, we have another issue that is affecting the lives and freedom of many of Americans. Those are the little babies, the preborn. And so as the niece of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., I want to encourage you today to remember the rights of all people, from the womb to the tomb. Dr. King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Dr. King also said that the Negro cannot win if he's willing to sacrifice the futures of his children for immediate personal comfort and safety. And so today I encourage you, as you make very important decisions on whom you will vote for, to remember to vote for your values and vote for life, liberty, and justice.